All right, welcome on holding by Pirke Avos. Ethics for our fathers. Again, we're holding by Pirke Avos. Ethics for our fathers. We are in chapter 2, Mishna 16. This is part 55. There'll be a part 56, 57, 58, I'm sure. Again, we're holding by Pirke Avos. Ethics for our fathers, chapter 2, Mishna 15. Mishna 16. It's part 55. The Mishnah said before, and they were Rabbi Yeshua, that an evil eye, we spoke a little bit about that, evil eye, evil inclination, that's where we're holding right now, and the hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we spoke last week about the evil inclination, and I've been speaking about the last number of weeks, but last week we spoke about the idea that, is it ever good? Can it ever influence me to do something good and something negative? No, normally we say the evil inclination is negative, right? It has a lot of negativity towards it, always trying to convince us to do things that we shouldn't do. Right, 100%, very good at its job. Doesn't need me to agree. Certainly over here, right? So that we spoke about. Last week. So now I mentioned another thing here, and that is that, as we said before, mentioned many times, that the evil inclination comes, right, tries to convince us, do things we shouldn't do, right, as we've said. And you take it a step further, or a little bit further, and that is, what does the evil inclination want? Right? We see from Parsha we just read today, Parsha's V'Yishlach, that the archangel of Esav confronts Yaakov. Right? Every nation, right, has their guardian angel, right, advocating for it in heaven for different things. Either God can say yay or God can say nay. If he thinks it's good for them or not good for them, or whatever. So what is this? What is this archangel of Esav? What does he do? So he attacks Yaakov, right? Fights with him. He sees, he can't damage him in any way. And in the end, he hits him, damages him in a hit. And that's where we get the Gita Nosha. He says that the Gita Nosha are not allowed to eat the Sinu, the sciatic nerve, right? Jews don't eat when an animal is killed, is properly slaughtered. The hind part is given over to non-Jew at pennies on the dollar, because we're not going to spend the time or effort or money in trade and getting all the sinews out and all that. Even though probably a few people in this generation know how to do it, nonetheless, it's pretty much not cost effective or whatever. So we don't even bother, right? We don't even really bother today, and therefore the hind quarter goes to non-Jews, right? And it's sold to non-Jews for, basically pennies on the dollar. We can't eat it, can't do anything with it. So we're allowed to sell it. Okay, so the Gemara Chulin says that this angel, difference of opinion exactly what he did over here, what he was disguised as. Yeah, some say he was disguised as a poor person. Some say disguised as a rabbinic scholar, right? Disguised in many different ways, right? Many, many different ways. Regardless, what was his goal? What was his goal? Right? His goal was to affect him, in a negative way. Now, how does this work? How does this work exactly? Right. So is an interesting thing here. It's brought down, right? It says Mori Rebbe going to Moshe should be well. And it brings down the following thing. He brings down from the Zohar itself, according to Kabbalah, that who is this Ish? Who is this person? The Torah says in the book of Genesis, chapter 32, verses 25, 26. Anyone wants to look it up, right? It says, V'yavak Ish imoy, and from the dust, whatever, came a person, Alo the Shachar, right, until dawn, so to speak. V'yirek ilo yacho lo v'yiga b'kaf yirecho v'takur kaf. Yaakov me'avak imo. So what did he say? He couldn't overcome Yaakov, right? It's good. Yaakov very strong, very good, right? Fighting seemingly with an angel over here. Nonetheless, he saw he wasn't able to overcome him. So what does he do? He hits him. He hits him inside, right? Hits him in the sciatic nerve. And he hits him there when he's fighting, right? He does, that's the damage he does. And from that, we see, right, that we're not allowed to eat sciatic nerve, right? We're not from that. It's one of the three mitzvahs of the book of Genesis that actually have halakhic ramifications. One is the Parshas Noah. It talks about Pru or Vu, right? Have obligation to be fruitful, multiply. Then you have the command by God to Abraham, do bris milah, circumcision. Then you have this. This is the third. The only three mitzvahs mentioned in the book of Genesis. Nonetheless, the Rebbe here brings down like this. He says like this. He brings down the Zohar. Now, what does the Zohar over here say? The Zohar says that who is this Ish? It says V'yavak Ish imoy. That he fought with this person. Yaakov fought with this person. Who is that? Judaism. So the angel of Esav. Yeah. Who is the Samach Mem? Considered Samach Mem, the inclination, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's a nasty angel over here. Very good. So what does he do? What's his goal, says the Zohar? What's his goal? In order to hit him somewhere where he's going to hit him in a place that's the foundation of Torah. We'll see why hitting him on the side is considered the foundation of Torah. So it comes on the Zohar and says, since this person's angel couldn't affect him, couldn't defeat him, so to speak, right? What did he see? He saw that Yaakov was so complete, there was no way to touch him or damage him in Torah. That's how strong Yaakov was. Yeah, you're not going to damage him in Torah. We saw at the beginning of the parsha, it says he lived with Lava for all those years, didn't learn from him, right? It's one of the things he tells Esav, which is the whole question why he tells Esav, why Esav would be impressed. Yeah, but the fact is, he lived with Lava for so many years, wasn't affected by it. All times he lied to him, all times he changed how much, what his wages were and different things, right? You see, he wasn't affected by him. He stayed whole, he stayed complete, right? He absolutely stayed, he stayed complete, right? He didn't falter, right? He didn't falter in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, and what did this angel want to do? What does this angel want to do? This angel, the goal was to hit the angel where that angel's going to hit him in Torah. That's where he's going to hit him. That's where he's going to try and affect him. Because it could affect him other ways, right? But he knows, as the Zohar says, he's got no control over his Torah. In other words, his Torah he can't fight. His Torah impossible to fight. So what does he do? He hits him in the side, right? Hits him by the leg, right? Literally by the leg. And what is that? So Zohar says that is the essence of where the strength of Torah comes from. Now, everyone's going to ask the question, what do you mean? Where does strength of Torah come from? Your head, right? Normally your head is where the strength of Torah comes from. Okay. Why the leg? Why the leg over here? Because the leg of a person stands the person up. Now you can tell me, even if a person's sitting, yeah, even if a person's sitting, can't learn Torah, doesn't have the power of Torah. Yeah, the legs hold them up, right? This is the explanation. The legs hold them up. So if the legs hold him up, and that's what's giving the strength of his Torah, right? Where is the soul in general? Usually by the bottom of the foot. Right? That's where it seems. That's where the soul is in general. But regardless, a person can't stand, or a person's weak in standing, it affects his Torah. Right? That's the explanation. How it affects it, I don't know. It affects his Torah. Right? Because he can't stand. Right? He doesn't have the power to stand. So he said that he had the power to hit. Right? Comes on this angel fighting with Yaakov. He hits him in the legs, so he can't walk. Right? Essentially, he can't walk. Because even though he couldn't destroy or weaken his Torah at all, so what does he do? He strengthens the ability to stand. But he had that power to weaken his ability to learn. Not the Torah itself. Big difference. Well, what did he hit? He hits a part of him that weakened his ability to learn. Now, if you say he didn't have the brain capacity, he still had the brain capacity. Brain capacity didn't touch. Wasn't able to touch. So what does he touch? He touches something else, but it's going to affect his learning Torah. And what is that? His legs. Again, you can tell me a person can sit and learn, okay. But if a person's in pain, from his legs, affects the rest of his body. You can tell me if he got hit in the shoulder, if he got hit in the hands, if he got hit in the chest, somewhere else, also affect him, okay. Not as bad as the leg. Right? That's what it sounds like over here. Not as bad as the leg. So what did he do? He had the ability to weaken his learning Torah. Right? Now, if he can't stand, he can't work, can't do anything. Right? The Mishna Pirke Avos says, "And kemach ain't Torah." Right? You don't have money. Can't learn Torah. Can't do mitzvahs. Right? Yeah. Spoken about that. But that's the point. In other words, he doesn't hit him directly. Directly, he can't do it. Doesn't have the power to do that. So he hits him indirectly. Very good. Hits him indirectly to weaken his ability to learn Torah. Not that the Torah itself is affected, but the ability to learn is affected. So then he adds another thing. He adds another thing over here. What does Zohar say? The Zohar says again, right? He fought with this man until Los HaShachar. Los HaShachar is before sunrise, right? It's before sunrise. So the war with the evil inclination, the Sultan, the evil angel of death, whatever you want to call him, yeah, is a war that's forever. Never changes. The way he goes about it changes. But the war itself, evil inclination is going to come all the time. Never going to stop. Never going to stop. Throughout our entire exile, right? What is the exile compared to? I was just learning this in Isaiah before. Exile is compared to what? To night. It's compared to nighttime. Right? Until the coming of the Messiah, which is compared to what? To dawn. Right? Sunrise. So what does Satan do? What does he do? He wants to weaken rich people in order that they will not give to Torah causes. Either causing them to lose money or causing them to lose their will to give. And because of that, what happens? If they don't give, they don't recognize that they should give, let's say, right? They don't see the great merits of helping people learning Torah. What does that do? In essence, it weakens Torah. It weakens the ability to learn Torah. Yeah, that's what it does. Now, comes on the inclination and says, okay, the Torah itself, in this case, going against Yaakov, I can't hit. I don't have the power to hit it. But what can I do? I can weaken his leg. I can weaken his ability to stand, which also represents what? People give money to Torah. To give money to help people sit and learn. Now that's a big thing. Why? Because we just said, "En kemach ein Torah." If I don't have flour, literally, I don't have Torah. What does flour represent over here? Flour, bread, money. That's what it represents. So you don't have the power or the desire, let's say better. You don't have the desire to give. He weakens that. Because some people say, why should I give to this? Why don't they all get jobs? Why are they all sponges, cockroaches? Why don't they do something for the world? Why don't they write a book on tax law, something important? Right, let's say. And some people say, why should I give? Let them do something. Let them do something. They're sitting and learning ancient texts. Okay. Get a job. Sure. Let them do something for the world. So they weaken their resolve. If I remember, I was once helping fundraise for somewhere I was learning. So someone was taking me around. He told me this person gave a certain amount. It wasn't very much. And, when you go collecting money, certainly for Torah institutions, you have to have two pockets. One pocket is take the money. The other pocket's the embarrassment you're going to get. Right? You have two pockets. So I knock on the door. This woman answers the door. Sorry, I'm collecting for this, for this institution, people sitting and learning, whatever. And she's like, no, I can't give to something like that. If you told me, it was cheder, it was like an elementary school, it was a girls' school, it was a yeshiva, whatever. Married men sitting and learning, as if to say, like, not really doing anything. I can't support that. I can't support that. So thinking quickly, I said, but that's exactly what we're being trained to do. We're being trained to do what we need to do in order to, go out and teach. Like, doesn't matter. I can't support that. That was it. Shut the door. Now, she wasn't giving like a big donation anyway. Okay. So this driver asked me, so what happened? I told him. He said, she didn't give you anything? I said, nothing. And he's like, all right, I'm crossing her off my list. Like, okay. Yeah. You don't have the merit to give. Yeah. You don't have the merit to give. But people get this thing in their heads. They're going to say, wow, why these people like over the age of 30, like, why are they sitting learning? Yeah. Why should I help them? Well, first, what does the first Mishna Pirke Avos say? There are three things besides going through the genealogy of how the Torah got passed down, right? What does the Torah say? What does the Mishnah there say? Mishnah says that the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Right? Avodah either meaning service in the temple, right? That's one thing. Right? Chesed, acts of loving kindness. Right? Avodah can be prayer also. Right? We spoke about quite a bit about that. And the first one obvious, Torah. The world stands because people learn Torah. The only reason the world exists. Because people are sitting learning Torah. Now, if at any time in history nobody's learning Torah, any time of the day, in history, if the Torah is not being learned by somebody, then the world goes back to the original chaos, chapter 1, verse 2 of Genesis, right? Kind of like the back of that Led Zeppelin album. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah, chaos. Chaos might not be so bad, right? You wouldn't have to listen to me, right? There's nothing in the world. Back to that original chaos. Torah upholds the world. Now, a person may think, you're not making so much money, this and that. Okay. Maybe just like another number. Maybe you should be doing other things, helping Jewish people in other ways. Okay, right? There is more to be said for that, but learning Torah holds up the world. Holds up the world. Now, if you don't have people supporting Torah, and you have this, from the beginning of time, you had a relationship between Yisachar and Zvulun. One of them worked and helped support the other in learning. It's been there since the beginning of time. Right? In other words, you need people to sit and learn. Yeah, you need people to support them. Because everybody's sitting and learning. Right? How are they going to live? Now, you could tell me, well, God can do anything, right? Shuvas Hashem Keravai. God can change anything in the blink of an eyelash. Very good. But according to nature, not everyone's going to be cut out to sit and learn. Okay. Yeah. They're not going to be cut out to sit and learn, so they have to work. They have fixed times to learn. Very good. But if they're working, okay. That's their excuse not to learn. But when they're not working, they should be learning. Now the Rambam just throws out that the Rambam says when it comes to sitting, someone who's sitting and learning, right? Or somebody working. How many hours of the day should that person be learning? Right? Now, you say if he's working, let's say 8 hours a day, maybe 9 hours a day, right? Let's say, whatever it is. Says the Rambam, now, the Rambam also holds, by the way, person should sleep 8 hours a night, right? 8 hours a night. So think, you sleep 8 hours a night, let's say you work 8 hours a day. What's the rest of the time? Besides eating, doing other things. How much time should you be learning? If you're working, I'm not saying you're learning full time. How much time? Says the Rambam, 8 hours. 8 hours. So I'll tell you a story before I get to this. Another story. Someone came to Chazon Ish, Rav Aaron Mishaya Karo, to bless memory, and Torah Giants, Bnei Brak, built up city of Bnei Brak. Here in Israel, Torah Giants, last generation, nothing to talk about. And this yeshiva student comes to him and asks him, Beit Zmanim, during intercession, it's in the summer, you get 2.5 weeks off, right? After the fast of the 9th of Av, right? Until the month of El, you got about 2.5 weeks. So he said, how much time, should I be learning during intercession? Again, a person might have to relax, might have to sleep more, do other things. Okay, but how much time should I be learning? Right? How much time should I be learning? So, Chazon Ish told him, you should learn like a boss. Right? You should learn like someone who works. How much should someone work? If somebody works, how much should they learn? How many hours a day should they learn? So, what do I laugh? You'll see why in a second. He said 8 hours. She'll be learning 8 hours like someone who works. Again, it applies to men, not to women, but it doesn't matter. But the yeshiva student said 8 hours. Said 8 hours. I don't think even when I'm learning full time, I'm learning 8 hours. It's like totally broken. It's like I'm supposed to learn like somebody who works. I'm not even learning those amount of hours. Yeah. Either way, says the Rambam. 8 hours. Now, let's do the math here. Yeah, you have 24 hours in a day. You sleep 8 hours. Let's say you sleep 8 hours, ideally. Okay. So that means you sleep 8 hours. You got another 16 hours. What do you do in those 16 hours? 8 hours you work, let's say. Maybe 9 hours. Well, let's say 8 hours will make it easy. Yeah, the math will be easier. You got 8 hours. The other 8 hours should be learning. Again, that'll be consecutively. First, learn an hour during the break, and then learn later, whatever, however it works out. Then you can spend some time with family, your family, whatever. Okay. But someone who's working should be learning 8 hours, says the Rambam. Rambam makes that very clear. 8 hours. How many people are doing it? Yeah, probably not so many, right? They're busy. They're busy working. Deal with family, other things. If they work a couple hours, that's good. They work 3 hours, 4 hours, or some people, if they get to work later, spend 3 hours learning, let's say, they work the rest of the day, maybe they work another hour here and there. Okay, but they're not working 8 hours, right? Probably most people don't work 8 hours. Yeah? They're not working 8 hours. So I can say everybody. That's a scary proposition. But in any case, the world is upheld by what? The world is upheld by Torah. That's what it's upheld by. The first Mishna in Pirke Avos. The world is upheld by Torah. I mean, there are two other things also. But we're speaking here about Torah, the importance of Torah. Very good. Now, most Torah institutions, in the red, have people head to yeshivas that glorified fundraisers. There's a travel all over. Okay, they get tuition. They are getting tuition, more or less. Tuition doesn't cover everything. They have to fundraise. And if you have a institution for married men, let's say you have 10 guys, 20 guys, however much you pay them a month, it could be $100,000 a year. It could be $150,000. I'm not saying, they should be paid a lot more than they are, but, they don't themselves have money, which most of them don't, so they have to fundraise, right? So they have to fundraise, okay. Now, if you don't have people supporting you, what's going to happen? That's it, you shut down. And, we said, and kemach ain't Torah. If you don't have, if you don't have flour, you don't have money, you can't support Torah. Torah will not be supported. Yeah, that's a big problem here today. In Israel, they're cutting funds left and right from the government. So, a lot of places are in serious danger because they're getting government funding. And, at the end of the day, better not to rely on them. My Rebbe's group, they don't take money from the government for exactly this reason. Right? For exactly this reason. I want to be beholden to them. Because there's an old saying, you say it outside of Israel, inside of Israel, doesn't matter. They say, Bala Mea, Bala Dea. The one who has 100, people want to hear what he has to say. Right? Kind of like those old E.F. Hutton commercials, right? Say, E.F. Hutton, right? And everyone's listening like what they have to say. Yeah, but the person has money, he's the one calling the shots. So the problem a number of years ago, they said, okay, you're taking money from us. We want to have a say in the curriculum. Now, you want to give secular government a say in the curriculum? They start learning things that are heresy. They had a problem in England like that. England, they had a serious problem with that. They wanted yeshivas to teach, about what do you call it, same-sex marriages and, and LGBTQ and all that. Now, they didn't go into the Muslims because they knew the Muslims would shut down the country. They knew there'd be absolute war. So, so they picked on the Jews there. So now, again, if you're getting money, they have a right, they do have a right to say where the money should go. Okay. Yeah, they should leave well enough alone. But I told my Rebbe the following thing. I told him that, so he's very big that, people shouldn't take money from the government. Exactly for this reason. So he said that, you got to make a protest about it. You got to say what the government's doing is wrong. They're not allowed to stick their nose in, when it comes to, Jewish schools, religious schools. Why should they have a right to say anything? Should have no right to say anything. So I told them, why are you protesting? They are taking money from the government. If they're taking money from the government has a right, for better or for worse. Bala Mea, Bala Dea, the government has a right to say, we want you to teach this or teach that, teach the other thing. I'm not saying it's right. They themselves will say, we have a right to say where our money goes. We have a right to say what they're teaching. He said, so the Rebbe told me straight out, he said, it doesn't matter. He said, you're right. He said, you're 100% right, but you still have to protest. You still have to say it's wrong. Yeah? So back in the day, 350 years ago, the Volozhin Yeshiva is the mother of all yeshivas. That we learn today, the way yeshivas learn today is based on the model set up by Reb Chaim Avos, a blessed memory, famous student of the Vilna Gaon, and blessed memory. And what happened in Volozhin? Why did the yeshiva shut down? The yeshiva shut down because government, the Russians made their lives a misery, an absolute misery, right? To learn Torah and all that. So what they do, they made a decree. You want to stay open. Well, I think it was 1 day a week. I don't think it was every day. I think it was even just 1 day a week. 1 day a week. If it had been every day, it would probably have been worse. 1 day a week, they wanted them to teach Russian. Russian language. That's what they wanted. They wanted them to teach Russian language. So the head of the yeshiva made a decision. They made a decision, and they shut down. They shut down the yeshiva. Now, why they shut down the yeshiva? What's so bad if they learn Russian for an hour? You do have yeshivas in the States. They have, secular studies in the afternoon, up to a certain point, right? More modern yeshivas, much more, right? Meaning that, they taught math, taught a little bit of science, different things, but, some teach more of it, some teach less of it. Not really the point, but why? Why did the village and yeshiva shut down because of that? Even though it was every day for an hour, let's say. We'll make it even worse. 1 day for an hour. What's so bad about learning the Russian language? So let's say there's nothing wrong with learning the Russian language in general. But what did they see? What did they foresee? They foresaw that if they give in and they shut down the yeshiva and they allowed to learn Russian 1 day a week, for an hour a day, or 1 day a week for an hour, that's only the beginning. That's not where it ends. In other words, if they do that, the Russian government will leave them alone. No. They'll come back with something else. And then they'll come back with a third thing and a fourth thing and, whatever. Wasn't like also, they were giving, tons of money to support them. They weren't. They for sure weren't. But at the same time, what happens? If you give in to that, then they're going to ask something else. And then if you give in to that, they're going to ask something worse. So he said, you know what? We're going to nip it in the bud right now. Because if we don't nip it in the bud right now, who knows what they're going to ask us to do? Right? Who knows? So therefore, they shut it down. They dispersed one other place. Yeah. Rather, again, at the outset, on the surface, the person will say, what's the problem? Why is that such a big deal? So the reality is, it's not a big deal. Teaching Russian, most people agree. Okay, so you have to teach Russian to stay open. Okay. You have to teach math. What's the worst thing about teaching math? Not the end of the world. Per se. Help you understand certain Gemaras. Okay. Not a big deal. Yeah, but why did they say this a big deal? Because they understood. They understood very clearly. If they start with this, that's not where it ends. That's only the beginning. So they shut down. So again, it's not really the topic, going in about secular studies, and all that. But the point is, if someone's giving money, if they're giving money, they got to say where the money goes. So now there's been an initiative because government's cut tremendous amount of money. The last few years, there's been a big initiative in the States, raising hundreds of millions of dollars. Still not enough, but, it's certainly helping. It's helping offset the losses, right? But that's the whole point. The whole point is, if you don't have people who have brains enough to give to the right things, that's going to weaken the whole Torah structure. Why is it going to weaken the whole Torah structure? Can't pay your bills, right? If you can't pay your bills, you can't stay open. If you can't stay open, the yeshiva closes. If the yeshiva closes, what are you going to do with all these students? What are you going to do with them? That weakens the Torah. And there's tremendous pressure today Tremendous pressure for places to stay open. They're fighting for their lives just of expenses. Yeah. So if you don't have people supporting them, or they're weak in supporting them, then what's going to happen? They're going to have a tremendous problem. Serious problem. So you need people to work for sure. You need people to work to help support. You need people to learn. Right? I'm not even talking about, places where, married men are going to be learning for however many years. Right? That's a totally different thing. I'm talking about elementary schools, talking about yeshiva high schools, right? You're training these people, okay. Then they're going to go on to get married. A lot of them will sit and learn for however many years, right? But they need to be supported. Yeshivas need to be supported. People who teach there need to be supported. Yeah, if you don't have money, they'll fall. There's serious problems. Inflation up the kazoo. Things cost a lot of money, even if you're charging tuition. Not everyone's paying full tuition. You got to raise a lot of the money also. It's a very hard thing. Right? So what does the inclination do over here? What does the Samech Mem, as he's called, what does he do over here? Right? So what he does over here is he hits Yaakov in a place where he's not able to stand. Now we understand that to mean when that happens, why what does it weaken? It weakens his ability to learn. That's what it does. Right? That's what it does. So comes on the inclination. And the Sar of Esav, as he's known, right? This angel of Esav, right? Let's say. What does he do? So Yaakov's strength in Torah, his power in Torah, he can't touch. He's got no way to touch. But what can he do? Right? He hits him in the hip, hits him in the leg. The leg can't stand very well, right? Can't function very well. So what does that affect? His ability to learn, weakens his ability to learn. But it's more than that, right? The Zohar is going further than that. The Zohar over there says it's going to affect his ability to help others sit and learn. I.e., what's it going to do? It's going to weaken Torah in general. Now, weakening Torah in general, what does that do? It gives the ability for people to think, I've helped out enough, or why should I help out, or, maybe I can't help out now, okay. But what does it do in essence? What it does in essence is it weakens a person's resolve to help. That's what it does. Because it weakens a person's resolve, that means it's not just the Torah. People learning are weaker. It means they don't want to support. There are two things here. It's harder for a person to learn Torah because they don't have the desire as much to learn Torah. It weakens them in one way, and it weakens others who have support in another way. Right? It comes along and tries to convince you not to do it, or why you shouldn't do it, or whatever the case is. So now you have two problems. One is the resolve to learn Torah gets weakened, and the other is people's support get weakened. Both a recipe for disaster. Because you need people to have the fire lit underneath them to learn Torah, and have that desire to learn Torah. But you need the bread, the kemach, the flour to keep it going. And if you don't keep it going, it dies. That's what will happen. It'll shut down. That's one thing. My Rebbe brings down something else over here. He brings down the name of Chofetz Chaim. Famous Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim brings in Shmiras HaLashon and his book on speaking Lashon Hara, in the Gate of Torah in the 6th chapter. What does he say over there? He brings in the name of the Sfarim HaKadoshim, holy books. Most likely Kabbalah here, yeah? That what does he say? He says the person that gives is from his money for people who learn Torah, even though this person's an Amaretz, this person knows nothing in this world, right? Doesn't know very much. So what does supporting Torah help him? How does it help him? He doesn't know very much. Very good. He will merit in the future to know Torah. How's that going to be? He's giving money to help support yeshivas, Torah schools, whatever it is. How is that going to help him in the future? How's it going to help his knowledge? So Chofetz Chaim explains, since he's giving money to Torah, he's getting rewards. He's getting rewards for the learning of the person. In other words, the person learning Torah, what does he do? He gets reward for himself for learning Torah. And if someone helps support her, they get support of that Torah. They get the merit of that Torah. So therefore, they have to know that that their greatest joy in the next world, their soul is going to be very close to God's through Torah. How's it going to be? They didn't learn very much when they were here. It's because they helped support others. And if they were, ignorant in this world, if they were ignorant in this world, how are they going to have anything in the next world? If they have a part of the world to come, they won't have very much. But the fact is, support Torah, right? So they get that reward. So there's a story, right? There's a story. Let me see if I just want to make sure I quote it right. There was a story. One second. That Mary brought down on this case. And where does he say it? Brings it down. Yeah. Brings it down like this. Brings down from the Zohar. Right? It says man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. Refers to the eternal war, which Satan waged throughout the exile, which is likened tonight to the coming of Mashiach, which we said. So he wants to discourage wealthy people from supporting Torah properly, right? And he conceals from these people who work, right, and have fixed times for learning the great merit of supporting Torah. So it was a Maisa. They told them the following story in the name of Rav Chaim of Volozhin. Chaim of Volozhin, the head of the Volozhin Yeshiva, famous student, as we said before, of the Vilna Gaon, was once asked a difficult question in the laws of Kilayim. Laws of Kilayim, very complex, all about mixing different seeds together. When it's forbidden, when it's permissible, what type of seeds, and this and that. Right? And he didn't manage to find an answer. Right? He didn't have an answer. So that night, the tailor came to him in a dream. He came to him in a dream and explained the depth of the sugya. He explains, what it meant, what the difficulty was, and what the answer was. Right? And he explained with all the early commentators, later commentators, until the practical law. Right? He explained to him in a dream. Now, Rav Chaim was amazed. Why was he amazed? He was amazed because he asked him, this tailor was ignorant during his lifetime. He said, how can it be? You didn't know very much in this world. And now he's speaking like a tremendous rabbinic scholar. Where do you get the knowledge from? So Taylor answered him, when he was alive, he had a charity box. Yeah, he had a charity box in which he put half of all his earnings. He would give money to Torah learners. He would give money to support people learning Torah. So when he reached the next world, it was pronounced he would merit to become a Gadol b'Torah. That he would merit to be a Torah giant. But he's a simple tailor. He was a simple tailor. Yeah, so how did he get there? Because he supported rabbinic scholars, he supported Torah learners, and because he did that, he was able to partake of the divine radiance like a major rabbinic scholar. He was then taught Torah until he reached this level. Imagine, person was an ignoramus in this world. But the fact that he gave money to help Torah learners, so he got part of the reward of their learning. So what did he have? He was taught privately in the next world, whatever that means. He was taught Torah until he reached that level. So Chaim of Volozhin woke up. He commented he had known about the great reward awaiting supporters of Torah. He understood. He knew what that meant. Yeah? But he did not be aware that they literally become rabbinic scholars in the world to come. That's a huge thing. Good incentive. Yeah? Someone supports Torah. Very good. Yeah? So they could have been they could have been an Amaretz in this world. They could have been an absolute ignoramus here. But the fact is, the money they get, or the money they give to support rabbinic scholars, they get a merit in that, and they themselves can become rabbinic scholars in the world to come. But what does the evil inclination come and do? The evil inclination come and, try and convince you not to give. The evil inclination come and say, why should I give? Yeah, story my Rebbe tells. When he was in South Africa, so he came to a wealthy individual for something for charity. And the person said, his business is not doing so well, he can't give. That he can't give. So Rebbe said, you got it wrong. He said, the fact that you did well, for the first 6 months or whatever, God gave it to you in full. Yeah. Yeah, God gave you a lot more. Very good. Just because you're not making out, you still have what to give. Right? In other words, let's say he's supposed to make a certain amount during the year. So the first 6, 7 months, now he's having dry months, okay. But he got it all in that amount of time, so he should give anyway. And not only that, he should give when it's most difficult. Let me have to level like excess debt. Yeah, per se. Right? But he said you should give anyway. Yeah, because you got the money up front. And because you got the money up front, he said you can't give now. Oh, but they're not making the same amount every month. Very good. So God gave it to you, up front. Right? But again, that's the work of the evil inclination. But the evil inclination is going to say, come on, you're not making any money. No matter if you made money for 6 months. It's a good argument, right? Not a slouch argument over here. Not a bad argument. But if God gave you the money up front, why can't you give now? If the evil inclination comes, and this is the whole point, the evil inclination comes and knows, it cannot, over here, it cannot weaken the resolve of the Torah of Yaakov Avinu. Okay. So evil inclination comes, hits him in the spot, which is going to weaken his ability to stand, maybe to learn a little bit. But who's that going to weaken also? It's going to weaken people who have the ability to give. Then they're going to be convinced in different ways why they shouldn't give, or they should give less, or whatever the case is. And then you run into a serious problem. Not just the problem of people not learning Torah the way they should. That's a different issue. Another part of the problem. But what's the problem they run into? The problem they run into is you're not food. Yeah? Ain't Kemach, ain't Torah. They're not going to support. And what happens when they don't support? What happens when they don't support? They have problems. Right? We understand this. It's not an age-old, it's not a thing that's right now. It's only going on now. It's happened for centuries. It's not it's not an old thing over here. There are times that were better. There are times that were worse. There were times that were like almost impossible. In Europe, before the war, how many people were, sitting and learning, full time? People couldn't. First of all, there was no money. People were starving, but you only had, handfuls of people. Besides the ones in yeshiva. Yeah, you had a handful of people. Not what you have today. Not what you have today. Even today, if it's so many people sitting and learning this and that. Good, you have a lot of yeshivas, you get a lot of people, under the age of let's say 18. Very good. How many people you have over the age of 25 sitting and learning full time? Yeah. People make this argument. So many people wasting their lives doing nothing that are married, they're not working. Yeah. How many people over the age of 25? Yeah. How many people you have in the mirror in Jerusalem? You have 3,000, 4,000 students. Parliament, you have a couple thousand students. In America, the mirror, you got, I don't know, 1,000 students. How many do you have over the age of 25? Sitting and learning. Right? So I'll tell you a dream. It's a dream. Let's say it's 50,000. Let's say. Very high number. Right? Not realistic at all. Very high number. Let's say it's 50,000. Yeah? And again, I'm being very generous here. Yeah? How many Jews live in the world? 15 million? 16 million? What's 50,000 and 6 million? It's like not even 1%. It's like maybe a quarter or 1%. Yeah? Over the age of 25. Less than the age of 25, you get a lot more. You get, maybe 100,000 or 50,000. Okay. Well, they're not married. Right? I'm talking about elementary schools, yeshiva katanas, yeshiva gadolas, from the age of like 14 to 16, and ages from like 18 to 20, whatever it is. Yeah, so then you have a lot more. Okay. But how many people you have sitting learning over the age of 25? People make this big deal. Yeah, so many people sitting learning, married, sitting learning. Not even a quarter of 1%. Not even. Right? So the question isn't, you have so many people sitting and learning. The question is, what are we going to do to boast the masters? Strengthen the masses. Not even close. Make it out to be like this unbelievable thing. Yeah, and not only that, even the money, with the budget, in Israel, how much were the yeshivas getting? In the budget itself, billions of dollars. They were getting money, don't get me wrong. They're not getting more than 1%. Or even 3% of the money, not even close. People say, they're sucking us dry, this and that. College students get a lot more than a guy over the age of 25 sitting learning. There's nothing to talk about. They don't call him a parasite. Yeah, they don't call him a cockroach. They don't call him other names. They're doing something for the world, go to college. You get a ton of money. Ton of money. Yeah, this whole thing with, without getting into politics about, doing the army, it's funny because you have Jews saying this. That sitting and learning is not a profession. It's nothing. Right? They delegitimize it to the point where they say it's nothing, it's worth nothing. Even their stats, how many ultra-Orthodox Jews, in the workforce, there are plenty. There are plenty in the workforce. Now, they want more in the workforce, okay. But if you're going to tell me there's nobody working, there's nobody working, not true. Totally not true. So a lot of, again, I did this a number of years ago, many years ago. I took college students at Hebrew University and every week we go through a newspaper, go through some articles, see what they're saying, see what the secular press is saying, and see what the reality is, right? And how to analyze. So many lies. This is one of them. One of the many. Yeah. They don't want to admit it, but that's the truth. That is the truth. And people say, you get all these people not working and all the people sitting and learning. How many? Quarter of a percent? You're going to say it's too many? If you told me it was 70%, if you told me it was 40%, or even 20%, you told me I had, 15,000 people. Still not a big number compared to the bigger scheme of things, but I'm saying 20,000 out of this 50,000. Okay. So then, maybe we'll have a discussion. But it's not even close. It's not even close. So on the one hand, there are too many people sitting and learning, right? On the other hand, there's nobody in the workforce. That's not true. It's just, it's just simply not true. right? I just saw something earlier, they're talking about, everything happened after October 7th, I'll get into politics. Yeah. Well, they were saying, we don't have enough resources, to combat the garbage people are saying. The lies, and it comes up over and over again. Genocide, genocide, genocide. Right? All these things that are outright lies. So you got people out there, trying to get the message across. You know what? People don't care. They're not hearing. They keep saying the same thing. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Well, the people who killed in Gaza, the vast majority, about 80, 90%, they're all terrorists. They're all terrorists. Okay. The other 10%, okay, they should have been killed. I agree. But what do you want to do if they use them as human shields? Nobody cares about that. To me, that was the most mind-boggling thing in the whole thing. They don't acknowledge it. They're like, doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. You're using human shields. You're using human shields, and if they get killed for them, the better, right? Because, a lot more propaganda, to use against against Israel. Very good. But what do you expect? What does the world expect? They use them as human shields. And I take videos of putting people not starving, they're not giving them the food. They're taking over the food, Hamas and all that. It's also, they also don't acknowledge that. Why do you think they ignore? Like, how in the world can you ignore these things? Right? So, without getting into propaganda, and all that, there are many, many things totally being ignored. Nobody cares. Don't excuse me with the facts. Well, the facts are on the ground. So why don't people see the facts? It's like someone came to the Pirke Avos, I see a lot of questions, they'll deal with them. Someone came to the Pirke Avos, blessed memory of Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. Someone from America comes and he says, Rabbi, he says there'll be more open miracles. If God will do more open miracles, people become, more observant. Jews become more observant. Pirke Avos said no. He said, I disagree. Why? He said, you got to be a vessel to see. If you're a vessel to see and you want the truth, it's one thing. If not, you won't see it. Two people see the same thing. They'll see the exact same thing, come up to very different conclusions. Right? I can say 39 Scud missiles. What are the odds? 39 Scud missiles during the Gulf War hitting absolutely nothing. Zero. It's supposed to be, unbelievable missiles, unbelievably accurate. How they hit nothing. Right? So, as we always say, it's either one or two things. Either got the stupidest people sending them. That could be. Right? Or you got to say it's above nature. Right? And, it's God's making them move. Another direction or hitting open areas, whatever. Okay. It's one or the other. Nothing in between. So someone takes off the calculator, off their watch, says, I can figure that out mathematically. I go, what if it's a 1 in a billion? If it's 1 in a trillion? The thing could happen. I said, would you play those odds? You want to tell me a couple wouldn't hit anything good. What if tell me 3 or 4 wouldn't happen, hit anything good? What if tell me 10 would, a third of them will not hit anything? I'll bet all the money I don't have on the table. I'll put it right on the table. Here you go. Let's go. 0. It's a 0 chance. No, but it could happen. If you have the ability to see, you'll see. If you don't have the ability to see, you'll be blind. That's it. It's a question what you want to see. All right, let me deal with a lot of these questions here. Somebody asks, can we go to the mikvah on Shabbos? Good. Just gotta be careful. Gotta be careful not to squeeze out here. And that would be a problem, certainly. Let's say you didn't, but you're still wet, you're carrying water if you don't have an Eru, right? That's a problem. But if you could get around, if your hair was dry and that wasn't an issue, then you could go. There are people that go. I mean, 20 of Hasidim go on Shabbos. Say if you have an Eruv, it's less of a problem, right? There are a number of issues, right? One of them, obviously, squeezing out your hair. So in my case, it wouldn't be a problem because I don't have any hair. So, that wouldn't be an issue. So you pat dry your hair, very good. Now you want to make sure it's totally dry or it's mostly dry. Because if you walk outside and you don't have an Eruv, you're carrying water. Then you're going to say it's not my intention. Well, who cares what your intention is? Nobody cares what your intention is. You're carrying water, right? That's the problem. Now, if that's not an issue, you're very dry, then you could, right? You just got to be careful, right? But can you? Yes. That is simple. That is a simple answer. Someone asked, can you compare Yaakov's physical battle to include physical appetites that were tempted by the Yetzer Hara? His physical battle, right? You could say it's a battle against evil inclination, right? Now that battle, the evil inclination, can be spiritual, 100%. Can be physical, right? Food is a physical temptation. Yeah. But with food itself comes a spiritual temptation. What's a spiritual temptation? What's a spiritual issue? The spiritual issue is that the Ramban says at the beginning of chapter 19, the book of Leviticus. I'll get there one day, I don't know exactly when. But the Ramban there says that you have to be holy. The Torah says you have to be holy because God is holy. Now, what does that mean? It means you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to drink, but it doesn't mean you should be 50 pounds overweight. Doesn't mean you should be a glutton, and it doesn't mean you should be an alcoholic. Right? You're allowed to drink within reason. You're allowed to eat within reason. Now, the question is overeating or or whatever you want to call it, is that a physical battle or a spiritual battle? So you'll tell me it's a physical battle. Okay. Yeah, but it comes with spiritual ramifications. Right? So a physical battle could be, also, with spiritual entities there as well. So could be, right? Very, very well could be. You have a physical battle, but there are a lot of spiritual undercurrents. Right? So in that sense, a person has physical, let's say physical desires. Right? A person is permitted, let's say, right? Person's married, permitted to be with his wife when she's permitted. Yeah, it doesn't mean, they should be together all the time. You gotta tell me it's permissible. Okay. But there should be some level of limitation, right? Limitation in spiritual terms. Why? To control a person's desire. Now, again, if it's permissible, it's permissible, right? That is no question. Question is, how often should a person do it? How often? First of all, weakens a person, that's true, but how often should a person do it? So we say the person should be, with a spouse like a chicken, not every time they feel like it, they have to curb that appetite also. Again, it's a physical thing and a spiritual thing. You have both sides, right? You have both sides to it, I would say. Someone says, is painting angels allowed? Angels have no body, right? Right? We do say that drawing anything in the heavenly sphere, right, is forbidden, right? So that would mean, the sun, the moon, planets, right? If they're drawn, let's say in 3D or in more than one dimension, right? That should be a problem because of what it represents. You're not allowed to draw things in that sphere. If you do something where it doesn't look, let's say it doesn't look like that, draw a picture of the sun with a smiley face. Like in the box of Raisin Bran, let's say. They say a picture of the sun with a smiley face. That's not a problem, right? You do something where it's not, let's say, recognizable as the sun, right? Or the moon. So angels would be the same thing, right? Even though angels don't have a body, right? Angels have no physical body. Now, to come in the world to do certain things, they have to be in a body, okay. But angel has no physical body, right? But I would agree, if an angel did have a certain body, then it would have to come under the same, it would come under the same forbiddenness. Yeah, so you'd have to draw it in a way that no one would recognize it. Yeah, that it was an angel. But angels don't have a physical body. So angels don't have a problem with either way because you can say, oh, this is a picture of an angel. Okay. But angels don't have a body. They don't have a body, then why should it be forbidden? Shouldn't be forbidden. Someone asked, also notice that Jewish homes have pictures or realistic artworks painted of sages. Okay. Right? That's again, a picture is not the same thing. Yeah, a picture we hold in general, it should be okay if it's more than one dimension. It'd be a 3-dimension picture of a person, the entire body would be forbidden. If it was a picture of a face, someone who made it's like 3D. Threw a pencil with like dog hair on the picture of this quote unquote, whatever, this rabbi, like, reading something, is reading, invitation, to my wedding, whatever. That's 3 dimensions. That's more than 1 dimension. Yeah, but it's only a picture of his head. I always tell people if you touch it, it'll bark. Yeah, because it's dog hair. Yeah, the relative that made that for me when I got married. So whatever, it's dog hair, whatever. Yeah, but it's only a picture of the head. It's only a picture of a head. But if it was a full body, that would be forbidden. 100% would be forbidden again, unless there's some flaw in it. Let's say a person had a doll. Yeah, an expensive doll. Right, let's say. Yeah. Now a doll, let's say we'll make it even better. Expensive ceramic doll. Now, if you break any part of it, you know, you don't want the person who gave it to you to see it, right? So what you want, so what to do is you break something, yeah, you break something where they're not gonna be able to see it. Let's say, I don't know, let's say this person has, stockings and shoes or whatever. So, take off some of the feet, some of the toes or whatever. You cover it up. That's okay, right? That would be okay. You take off part of the ear. Again, so, again, if it's something, it has to be something where, you break something of it, right? You break something of it. Now, in this case, right, if you had pictures of righteous people, rabbis, let's say, if you had pictures of the rabbis, yeah, a picture is okay. Picture is not a problem. The stipler of Israel, Yaakov, Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, blessed memory, stipler, father of Chaim Kanievsky, a blessed memory. He was against having his picture taken. He did not want his picture taken. Yeah, everybody else pretty much agrees. I mean, he was a minority opinion, but basically everyone else agrees having a picture. Having a picture is okay, right? A picture and is more. They don't consider it more than 1 dimension. Yeah, if it was, let's say, embroidered, that might be an issue, right? Needle pointed, that might be an issue. Yeah, but a picture in general should be all right. So again, angels. I mean, I don't see why angels should be a problem if we don't know what they look like. They don't have a body. Yeah. You gotta say, wow, someone had a picture of this angel, and this is what the angel looked like. All right, but I didn't know that's what the angel looked like. Yeah. Angels don't have a body. They don't have a body. Like saying, can you draw a picture of God? Doesn't have a body. Right? Yeah. Remember as a kid, this is ass, kids are asses. Draw a picture of God. They wouldn't do that in public school anymore, probably. But what would you draw a picture, of God? What would people draw? Probably someone, an old man, gray hair, white hair, whatever. The cane. The cane, a crown on his head, sitting on a throne. Okay? God has no body. Torah makes that very clear. God has no body. We anthropomorphize. God's got an outstretched arm, strong hands, right? Again, it's anthropomorphism. It's giving physical character traits to a spiritual entity. But the spiritual entity does not have physical counterparts, right? It's talking about his power. Yeah, one aspect of it, right? Talking about his power, but God has no. You can say this is a picture of God. God has no image. So how can that be forbidden? You're not drawing anything. You're drawing an old man with a cane sitting on the throne. Okay. With a crown on his head. Very good. Is that God? Is that going to be forbidden? Oh, look! He's drawing a picture of God. Can't make any any foreign images. There's a foreign image. Not a foreign image. Nothing. God doesn't have an image. Yeah, if you make it into an idol and you worship it, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. But if God has no image or something has no image and you draw an image to it, does that make it forbidden? Why should it make it forbidden? Why should it make it forbidden? There's no image. Yeah. So who gave the right for people to give these angels images? And even say, say if you tell me they really have an image, good, that would be forbidden. But they don't. So if they don't have an image, what's the problem? Yeah, shouldn't be an issue. That's what I would say on that. Somebody asks, is it okay? Someone whose Hebrew isn't strong, isn't a native speaker, recite liturgy in English. Would that still considered appropriate or kosher? For some things. I would say better say it in Hebrew, even if you don't understand it. Even if you have to break your teeth on it. Certain things don't translate, though. Right? Certain things do not translate, so it doesn't help you. But for most things, if you say it in a language that you understand, you fulfill your obligation. You definitely fulfill your obligation for most things. Right? There are certain things that do not translate. If they don't translate, then then even if it is translated, it doesn't help you. Right? But for most things, I would say it would help you. So I would say better to say, fewer prayers that you do understand, and have intention saying them than saying the majority where you don't understand anything. Right? But most of the ones, I want to say everything. So you want to say whatever language you understand. You could. Not the best way to do it, but you certainly would fulfill your obligation, right, as well. But a question is how long a person does that. Some people will say, if I get a prayer book that has transliteration, then I'll be able to say the words and say more. Okay, right? But people have told me, and I think this is true. I wouldn't tell people to do it. Is because once you really learn Hebrew, then you're going to realize there are certain things you definitely said wrong, right? And you have to relearn everything you said anyway. So I would tell you, in the short term, that's better. That works better. I would say in the long term may come back to bite you. And the reason it'll come back to bite you is because there are words or phrases or even entire prayers you didn't say right because now you learned how to read Hebrew properly. So now you're going to go back and relearn everything. Now again, some people will say, I'd rather do that in the short term. Okay. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. Yeah. Someone says, clarify what works best. I just told you. In the short term, you want to learn with transliteration. You want to pray with transliteration. In the short term, it's better. In the long term, it may cause you problems. Definitely may cause you problems. Why? Because you'll see that certain things you said or you thought you said right, now you realize you said them wrong. Because now you know Hebrew, right? Now you learn Hebrew properly. Very good. Right? So again, you want to pin me down and say, should you get a prayer book that is transliterated? No. I would definitely say not. Other people would say in the short term it helps me. So I want to do it. Okay. Right? I think a person's going to get burned in the long run. If they don't, very good. Right? But you want to say, what should you do? Don't do it. I would tell you, say fewer prayers that you know you're saying right. Say it with more intention than try and say a lot of prayers and break your teeth. Yeah. But some people will swear by saying, not literally swear, but they'll say it's a lot easier with transliteration. Okay. I'm not denying that. Yeah, I'm just telling you in the long run, it might come back to bite you. So again, you want to pin me down, I'd say don't do it. I don't think it's a good idea. Right? Because I think people are going to get burned from it. And if you don't, very good. But once you learn Hebrew, you have to relearn things you already started to say for so long. Then you're gonna feel person will feel bad. They'll feel bad for doing that because they're gonna say I said all these prayers wrong. Well, it's a good thing you're a non-Jew, so you don't have a problem. Yeah, yeah. So okay, it's not an issue, right? But in the long term, I think it's worse. You have to learn Hebrew at some point, right? So it's better to say, fewer prayers with more intention, but same right. Than trying to say a lot of things are gonna take you forever to do it. And you add every so often when you start mastering certain prayers you say. Very good. So then you add others. But you do it slowly. That's the way you do it. Right? Am I saying the transliteration is incorrect? Sometimes. Depends how you pronounce it. Sometimes it can be incorrect. Because you're going to pronounce it one way. It may not be exactly pronounced that way. A person sees an AW sound, right? You're going to say ah, right? It's like ah sound. But it could be an O sound. That's a mistake. Yeah, it depends on the words. Yeah, there are certain things that a person will pick up. Guarantee you won't pick up. Right? How do I know? Because if you don't know how it's said properly, you read the translation, you'll make a mistake. You'll make a mistake. Now, and again, I'm not saying it's, translators' fault per se, right? They may be expecting a person to know a little bit, but probably not. So they'll say the ah sound, that's the way you say it, okay. But in certain words, even if you have a T under the word, it's really an ah sound, right? An ah, right? An ah sound. But on certain words, it's an O sound. I'll tell you that. I'm telling you that. There's an O sound instead of an ah. So a person's going to say, right, sometimes the word Adam, let's say, it's actually not a good idea, not a good example, because it's a different vowel there, whatever. On certain words that you have a T underneath the word, underneath the letter, right, which is an ah sound, could be an O sound. But in all cases. Maybe in a handful of cases that is the case. But guess what? You come up across this word, you say it's an ah sound, it's the wrong pronunciation. Yeah, I can probably find other issues. I'm not saying they're all wrong, right? Some of them could be. And if some of them could be, it's going to throw you off when you learn it properly. Yeah, may not come up as often, doesn't matter, but there are some issues. There definitely are some issues. I didn't say the entire translation. I said sometimes. Sometimes there are words in there that the transliteration is not good. Not in all cases. But I think people will be surprised once they learn Hebrew if they look at the transliteration. It helps in the short run, right? It helps in the short run, but I would say there are things there that people will make mistakes on. I guarantee people will make mistakes. Yeah, they'll definitely make mistakes. But is it better that than nothing? Yes, I think it's better. But you have to break your teeth. That's the only way. This is easier, but there may be certain translations that might be problematic. This includes art school. Art school doesn't do that. Art school doesn't transliterate. I don't think. Maybe they do. Maybe they do. Let's see. It could be. They have okay. They have so. Their transliteration is probably good. Yeah, I'm saying it's not foolproof. Definitely not foolproof, but it's probably pretty good. Yeah, I would rely on it. But again, I'm not saying it's 100% foolproof. You got to remember, it's about transliteration. Translation's also not foolproof. Because even with art scroll, they're telling you a certain translation based on, let's say, one of the commentaries. It's very hard in many places in the Torah to translate literally. First verse is a very good example. You say, Bereshit bara Elokim beis hashamayim beis haaretz. In the beginning of God's created the heaven and the earth, right? Very convoluted statement here. Because you got the word Bereshit. Question is, what's the root of the word? Do we say beis? It's like an introduction, which means in, and then Rashis means first, or do we say the root of the word is Bet Resh Aleph, means to create? Because if I say it means create, then I got a problem because it says Bereshit bara. It says create, create, it says twice. Same root. Right? So you see, that's one example. I give hundreds of examples, in places that are difficult to translate. But you have to understand what translations do. If they would give you a literal translation, you'll never understand anything. It won't make any sense in a number of places. Right? Other places it will make sense, the literal translation, but you won't know what it means. Yeah, you won't understand what the Torah is trying to tell you. Yeah, nonetheless, you have a problem with translation either way. Either way. But usually Art Scroll and other translations are going to court according to certain explanations. Maybe according to the Ramban, maybe according to Rashi, right? In other words, what they're gonna do is they're gonna translate in a way that's gonna make it flow according to whatever explanation. Yeah, it's not the literal explanation. Because there are many places literal, I mean, some things there will be literal explanation. Yeah. But other places where you can't explain it literally, you have to explain it according to one of the commentaries. Right? So, that's the whole thing. You're getting a translation, based on what Rashi says, based on what the Ibn Ezra says. But I was learning Isaiah earlier, right? Started learning Tanakh on usually during the winter, on early Saturday nights. I started from Joshua. I'm still somewhere in Isaiah, Isaiah 21, I think that's where I am. Anyway, there are a number of translations I saw that went according to what Rashi says. Again, why? Why they translate it that way? Because it's hard to explain what the words mean literally. You can say what the words mean, but it's going to be incomprehensible. It's going to be unreadable, right? They want people to at least understand. Forget about what's going on in general. It's another issue. They want to understand what the words mean, right? What the statement is, what the sentence means. What's going on and what's behind it and all that's a totally different thing, right? But there are things like, I'm looking up things all the time because, words are used in different contexts, used in, not used as often. It can mean this, it can mean that, it can mean the other thing. So I'll look at one of the commentaries, see like, okay, how are they learning what this word means? Forget about what's behind it. That's another issue. And what it's talking about. What does literally the word mean? What it's telling means something else, but what does it mean? Yeah, so the translation will go according to some explanation. Otherwise, it's very hard to translate. It's very hard to translate, right? In general, so any of these things, you got to be careful of, and ArtScroll will do a good job, and probably put a footnote in there and say this goes according to Rashi, this goes according maybe to the Ramban, this goes according to, I don't know, whoever, right? Things that are easily explainable, that are easily understandable, very good, so translate it like that. They don't have a problem with that. I'm saying you got verses that it's hard to translate. Especially, certain passages, in Tanakh that just don't translate well. You look at it, try and break down the word, you try this, trying that. What's the easiest thing to do is look at what some of the commentators say, and then try and go back and see what the sentence is. Right? Or, you can read the English and then see where they got it from. Right? So I saw that, I see that all the time. Because when I go through the other commentaries, it's very clear where the English got it from. Okay. Right? But to look at it face value is very hard. Right? Some things are very hard because if you know the roots of words, you're going to say, why is it used, double language? A lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, there are times, there's a double language. So it's saying the same thing. Is it used for emphasis? You have to see what exactly is being used for. Someone says Vintage Rebbe, Satmar Rebbe, Brisker Rub, whatever. Yeah, and other Jewish Rebbes as well. What does their name significant? The significance is where they came from. Visions, was a community, I think, in Poland, right? I'm not expert where all these places are. Brisk was a place in Russia. Yeah, Satmar was a place, I think, in Russia. Yeah, that's where they came from. Yeah. When they say the Brisker of, that means that's where it came from. Came from the town of Brisk. Right? Sometimes there'll be great rabbis, they'll say, they call them the Lumzadayan, right? The Lumza, what do you call it? what's it called? Um, Rabbinic leader, let's say, right? Or rabbinic judge, let's say better, rabbinic court judge. Very good. Yeah. Lomzo was a place. I was in Poland, I think. Yeah. So what does it tell you? It tells you where he came from. Tell you what city he was from. Yeah, that's what it means. That's what the names represents. You know, um, Chabad's a different thing. They got it from Chokhmah, Bina, Vadas, right? Chokhmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding. Das is, also another level of understanding, right? But, a lot of times these great people were named either after their books, right? Chassam Sofer, his last name was Sofer, but he was named for, the book that he wrote, which was, his main work was on questions, answers all over the Torah and Jewish law, right? A lot of people know. It's funny. A lot of people know him by their books, not say by their name. I mean, there are people known by their name also, but I'm saying in general. So some people were known. Right, my Rebbe was known when he came to Israel. Was known as the Londoner Eloi. Right, Eloi means genius. London's where he came from. Right, he's born in London, born and bred in London. Right, so anyone in Israel knows, back in the day when he came to Israel as a yeshiva student, yeah, he was known as the London Relay. That's where he came from. Came from London. Yeah, he was known as Mordechai Pogramansky was known as, where did he grow up? In Tels, right? Tels in Europe, wherever Tel, was in Poland or Russia, wherever it was. Yeah, he was known as the Tels at Ely. Yeah, because he came from that place. Well, some people said, like, this person, it's called Chaim Telzer. Why is it called Chaim Telzer? That's where he came from. His name was Chaim, his first name was Chaim. He came from Tels. Came from this place in Tels. Right? So that's what it means. Right? Usually, when they name, usually a lot of these places, they gave them they gave names like, the rub of this, the rub of that, the rub of the other thing. Yeah, it's from where they came from. That's what it means. Right? It's from where they came from. Yeah, somebody asks, what do I think about Yemenite Judaism? Listen, they have a tradition. They have their traditions. If they see a certain grasshopper, they can eat it. They have their traditions, their pronunciations. They're just as holy as anyone else. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I do have a problem eating grasshoppers. I don't think, they say it's high in protein. I don't know, but, they have their own traditions. I don't have an issue with that. Anybody who has their own traditions, they're based, they're based in Jewish tradition. Okay, people have different customs. Hasidim have different customs. Some different customs than Sephardic people, and Sephardic people have some different customs than Ashkenazim. Okay, 99% we agree on everything. Yeah. So Yemenites have they have their own traditions. Yeah, it's not a problem. Definitely not a problem. I don't follow them, but if I was Yemenite, then yeah, you know, that's a different issue. I don't have an issue with it. Ethiopians are a different issue. Ethiopians are certain things that, marriage, divorce, they didn't have, according to Jewish law. So a lot of them probably, mamzer, probably, you have an issue with that. So saying that they're Jewish is a problem, right? Even though Chief Rabbinate holds, like by Avad Yosef, blessed memory, that you don't have to convert them, but everyone else disagrees. Everyone else pretty much disagrees, and they should have some level of conversion, for sure. Because if you say they're Jewish, they're probably a mamzer. If they're probably a mamzer, came from an illegitimate union, two people that weren't allowed to be together, they can only marry someone of that union or a convert. That makes it very problematic. So it's better to say that they're non-Jews, right? Definitely better to say they're non-Jews and let them go through some, through conversion, right? They may not think so, and they may think they have their traditions, whatever. The vast majority of rabbinic scholars hold they're not Jewish, right? And it's problematic to say they're Jewish. The chief rabbinate holds they're okay. And they go according, Ravadi Yosef's not a small person by any stretch. And they go by what he said, okay. Yeah, but everyone disagrees with him. The vast majority of rabbinic authorities disagree with him. Yeah. So, So again, if they have proper traditions, which the Yemenites certainly do, yeah, I don't have an issue with it. Right? It doesn't bother me. Right? I won't eat grasshoppers, but that still doesn't bother me. Yeah. What the Jewish Orthodox stance on vaping in order to fight anxiety? We had a discussion today at the Shabbos table about vaping. Vaping, they don't have enough data. Right? I just listened to the whole podcast on this a while ago. They don't have enough. I mean, listen to experts on this. So I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm just claiming what I heard experts talk about, and that is that they don't have enough data. They do not have enough data to show how bad it is. I would say, on the other hand, right now, is it bad as smoking? No, definitely. I don't think it's as bad as smoking, but there will be, like I said, they don't have enough data. They don't have enough data to show it's bad. They have some data showing, yeah, what it's done to people, but they can't outright say like smoking that it'll kill you. You need a lot more data for that. You need at least another 20, 30 years of data for it. It's got nicotine in it, yeah. Yeah, is it addictive? Certain ones, yeah. Someone said they took certain things off the market because they're tremendously addictive. Okay. Can it cause problems? Sure it can. Is it the same? Can't say right now it's the same. Cannot say right now it's the same. Yeah. So now the question is, right? The question is that a good thing? Is that a good thing in general? To help anxiety. I said if you can find something else, there are benefits in the sense where secondary smoke is not such a big issue. But the problem is people smoke it more because it doesn't have the same smell, right? Secondhand smoke actually is not as bad. Doesn't seem like it's as bad. So people smoke it all the time. That's the problem. That is the problem. So cigarettes today, you won't see people smoking in a synagogue or a study hall. That you won't see. Okay, if they're going to smoke, they'll smoke outside, but they're not. They're not going to smoke inside. Vaping, people will vape inside. Yeah. Now, some people are against it, even if you have windows open, whatever. Some people are against it. They don't want smoke. They don't even want secondary smoke. Okay, but secondary smoke has not been proven like secondhand smoke of cigarettes to be as bad. Could it be? Could be. It could be, right? But again, it's first of all the smell is a lot better. That's for sure. But the issue is, or one of the issues is that there are people that because they can smoke it anywhere, right? Because smell's not an issue and all that. That means they smoke more of it. Now, if they smoke more of it, that can have a long range effect, tremendously long range effect. But statistics are out. We don't have them. We don't have them. People are saying, experts are saying, don't do it. That's what experts are saying, but they don't have enough statistics to say it's outrightly forbidden. They can make conjecture and say this is what it could do, and the difference between vaping and let's say regular smoking. People know you smoke. What does it do? It makes your lungs black, right? This collapses the lungs. That's what they claim. Yeah, it collapses the lungs. So the story of someone 16-year-olds who vaped and like dropped dead of a heart attack or whatever. Okay. Again, no one's going to say it's a good thing. No one's going to say it's a good thing. The only question is, can you outrightly say it's forbidden? Because of stats like smoking. Smoking is no question. Smoking is absolutely no question. Yeah, stats are out there, been out there for a long time. It will shorten your life. That there's no question. Now, is vaping under the same category? Could be. It could be, but they don't have the stats for that. They won't have the stats for another 20 years, probably. 20, 30 years. So now you're going to pin me down and say, is it good against anxiety? I don't know. Maybe it is, but I wouldn't do it. I definitely wouldn't do it. Find something else for anxiety. I wouldn't take that because, that could be a problem. Right? But no rabbinic authority right now today is going to say it's forbidden. They're not going to say it's forbidden. So technically, You can say, okay, so it's not forbidden. Okay, yeah. 20 years down the line, there could be enough stats to say, yeah, it's tremendously problematic, right? So I would tell anyone, medical marijuana, okay, it's a different issue. That's a different issue. Um, that's this is sake of pain. You know, when people say, certain circumstances should be okay, but in general, for this, I say find something else. Find something else because this could very well be problematic. This could be no different than smoking and the effects, but they, like I said, they still don't have stats for it. Some of these vaping nicotine to quit smoke. Okay, yeah. But they don't. It has shown there have been people with like no issues whatsoever, and like young people that's caused serious damage to, right? And, again, you can tell me they're isolated incidents. It doesn't happen all the time. Okay, it's true. That probably is true, but you know, people who are experts in the field have said that they're pretty confident within 20 years, 20, 30 years, it won't be any different. It won't be any different. And there's still nicotine in there, so it's very hard to quit also. Also because it's addictive, right? But there are experts claiming that it's going to be similar. They think it's going to be similar. So again, I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I would say, yeah, it's better, not to, for sure. I wouldn't wait 20 years to see what's going to happen. That's what people said by the COVID shots. Oh, don't worry, 2 years, whoever took it's going to die anyway. I was like, okay, so we're still here, so that's good. That's a good sign. Not knowing what that's going to be like. Astronauts help with anxiety, energy loss. Okay, listen, there have to be better things. There have to be better things than that. Even pills are better than that, probably, as long as have other side effects. But anything a person takes has some level, some level of side effects. Someone told me, whatever, they need to take a certain pill for something, and like anything, medically, they have like 20 things they could do. They could potentially do. Yeah, it could cause a stroke, heart damage, liver damage, like all these things. They have to put it on there because they have to warn you. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen, whatever, but they have to warn you. And people say, well, if I have to take it, I have to take it. Like, if you take something else, whatever, but everything has side effects. Some level of side effects. But like someone was listing like, 20 different side effects for this one pill that they really had to take. And like, what are you gonna do? You have to take it. So that's gonna have brain damage. I mean, put that up there. I mean, all kinds of things. All kinds of like very, very serious things. But they have to warn you. Now, it doesn't mean it will happen. They're saying that you could have these side effects. Yeah, dizziness, nausea, vomiting. I don't know. You feel like, I don't know, your body doesn't exist. Who knows what? I mean, like all these things. Maybe none of them will happen. Hopefully none of them will happen, but they have to put these side effects on it just so you won't sue them, afterwards. Someone asks, is there a company you tell if you are from Jewish lineage? If you use with based in? No. That was easy. Now, what's the reason? They could tell you, in theory, they have these websites that go through that are genealogical websites. They're good. I'm not saying they're not good. And they could say, they could maybe trace the person to this family, that family, whatever. But what does the base them want to see? This is not going to help. What they want to see beyond the shadow of a doubt, if a person wouldn't have to convert, let's say, one of them will be a marriage certificate from a grandmother, great grandmother, Jewish marriage certificate. They don't have that 3 or 4 generations, preferably 4 generations buried in a Jewish cemetery. If you don't have either, then a person would have to convert. But genealogy, you'd have to have people in that place. You'd have to have people in that place where they lived that knew them, that are pretty much still alive, that could say they lived in this community. Now, I didn't have a case. Someone told me about a case that this woman had all this information, plus somebody knew their family. Somebody knew their family, and rabbinical court didn't even flinch. It was better evidence than not. Yeah, but they didn't flinch. So another case, someone had all kinds of information. He brought this like folder, this like big thick folder, to base into the rabbinical court, and they were telling the story. They put the folder, on the table, and they had the basin just pushed to the side. Didn't even open it. Didn't even open it. Yeah, you need very, very hard evidence. Extremely hard evidence. Genealogy website, not going to be hard evidence. Yeah, you would, even having someone, if they be alive today, and they knew that your family lived in this town, and they knew a person's grandmother lived in this town, known to be Jewish, even then, this friend of mine told me, they were, it's much more compelling evidence, no question, very, very strong evidence, and they still didn't look at it. They still 100% didn't look at it. So, genealogy website won't help you. DNA won't help you. Right? It's either going to be a marriage certificate, Jewish marriage certificate, or buried 3 or 4 generations, in a Jewish cemetery, which most people cannot produce. Yeah. Yeah, it's somebody that's, I don't know, they grew up, where they grew up? They grew up in Nicaragua. Now I think they're in the States. They grew up in Nicaragua, I think, and all the cemeteries destroyed. Yeah, thank you, Noriega. Right? Destroyed all Jewish cemeteries. So there's no evidence. They might be Jewish, okay, but there's no evidence. So no evidence, you got to convert. There's no way to prove it. Right? So it's got to be very hard evidence. They don't have hard evidence, it's not going to help. Right? There are genealogical websites out there. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not going to be used as evidence to base it. No one's ever going to take it as evidence. They won't even look at it. Yeah. Yeah. What they want to look at is either, and they're not really going to look at this either, but somebody who could testify that this person was Jewish in their community. Yeah, that lived in their community. Right? Either a marriage certificate or either a marriage certificate or buried 3, 4 generations, right? In a Jewish cemetery. I can tell you exchange for a payment. I don't think they're all scams. I don't believe they're all scams. But I'm saying even if it's legit, let's assume they're legit. Doesn't help you, right? Right? I don't think they're scams. Yeah, maybe some could be. I don't know, but I wouldn't think. I wouldn't think they are. But it doesn't matter. Or it doesn't matter. Even if they are legit, it's not going to help. Right? It's not something that's going to help someone in conversion anyway. Um, One second. Someone here says, someone says you're not Ashkenaz. Doesn't matter. Person thinks they are, they're not. They got a DNA test. Doesn't prove anything. Doesn't prove anything either way. Yeah, could be. It proves okay. They have some Ashkenazi blood. Okay, could have part American Indian blood. You could have, I don't know, Asian blood. You could have other types of blood. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Bigger scheme of things. So a person wants to think, okay, they're Ashkenazi, good, or not. It doesn't matter. That doesn't really matter either way. You could change it if you wanted to. A person could be, a person wanted to be Sephardic or Ashkenazi, they could change. Right? That's not a problem. I mean, someone will say, I feel a certain way. Okay. Yeah. So that's fine. But again, what do you call it? Cemetery is the best evidence. Would be the best evidence. Right? But again, not going to be so easy to find. How long does it take to convert? I would say on the average, a couple years. At least a couple years. A couple years to learn, and at least a year living. Even a person lives in a Jewish community, they want to see you go through the cycle of all the holidays and whatever for at least a year, right? But it shouldn't take more than a couple of years, 2, 3 years, right? If a person lives in a Jewish community, if they have all the knowledge and they move, they're not again, rabbinical court is not going to convert them straight away. maybe easier for them to convert, but they're not going to convert them necessarily straight away. But they want to see them at least a year in the community. So again, on average, I would say about 2 years, probably 2 to 3 years, on average. It can be shorter depending on certain circumstances. But what's the most important thing they want to see? First of all, you live in a Jewish community. Second of all, you have the knowledge. They want to see that you have the knowledge. Yeah. So it's going to take time to get the knowledge. But again, getting knowledge is it's about 2 years. I would say it's about 2 years. Someone ever said it takes as long as short as again, average. The average should be about a couple of years, but it depends on a lot of different factors. Right? It will depend on the person, it'll depend on the circumstances, right? But the general rule is all things being equal, it should take a couple of years. Some people can take longer for extenuating circumstances. Could be based on knowledge, could be based on the fact they couldn't move. I don't know. Could be based on a lot of things. Usually that process is going to be longer because it takes people longer to move. That's probably the truth. Is it possible that like, genetic testing gets better, say 20, 40 years, will be used as proof? Nope. Never going to be used as proof. Genetic testing is not going to help. Doesn't prove anything. Yeah. But it doesn't, it can say like, percentage of, being Jewish. Okay. But what does that mean? It's not going to be 99%. It's going to be a small percentage. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 15%. Maybe someone will tell me it's 30%. Okay, it doesn't prove anything. Blood test will not prove anything. Biggest proof is either, again, marriage certificate or buried in a Jewish cemetery. Right? 20, 30 years, I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever. Are there some areas more accepting others converts in Israel? Loaded question. I love these easy questions. I would say yes. There are certain communities I would say it's easier. But I would say unless the person's going to be, let's say, modern Orthodox or religious Zionist, let's say, or even what they call Dati Lumi, which is, I guess, I'd say is modern Orthodox, I guess. There are communities, for people like that, they're probably more accepting, and I'd say a handful of communities. Most communities here, again, either going to fit in those circles, which there are places there. There are places, or everyone else is black and white, right? It's very much black and white. So I would say like this: if anyone wanted to come to Israel, again, you want to be religious Zionist, modern Orthodox, okay, you'll fit in certain places, yeah. But if a person really wanted to fit in Israel, it's black and white. You got to be ultra Orthodox. There's nothing else to talk about. So which is why I wouldn't tell people to come here. So I mean, there are some places that I would say that it's a little more funky, that have different types of people there. Okay. Where a person fit in better, but I would say person really wanted to fit in, then I would tell you, that you should be ultra Orthodox because that's the best way a person would fit in. Otherwise, again, I'm not going to say there aren't communities for, someone who's modern Orthodox or, let's say ultra Orthodox alike. There are, definitely are places for, people like that. But I would tell people for sure, you want to be part of the majority. If you want to fit in, you want to fit in, right? These other places, smaller places, they're smaller places. The vast majority of places are, ultra Orthodox. That's the majority out of the communities. There are places, a little more traditional, this, that. But again, if you want to live with the cream of the crop, that's where you should live. You want to be with quote unquote pretenders to the throne that are never going to get anywhere, right? And I'm not saying the Orthodox community doesn't have issues. We all have issues. Yeah, I'll take these issues over other issues. Yeah, and this is what works. And this is the strongest Jewish community in Israel are the ultra Orthodox communities. No question. A question of money and where a person can live. Okay, it's a different issue, but to fit in, I think in the States a lot easier. Many more out of town places where a person can fit in, that are more accepting. That's why I tell people stay there. Because coming here, it's hard. It's hard because of the language. It's hard because of just fitting in here. It's hard because of the Arabs. But again, even without the problem with the Arabs, just fit it in, but the language and the mentality is very different. It's very, very different. So, any one of the states is much easier being an out of town place, meaning not New York or New Jersey. Just much easier, much more accepting, much more accepting. Um, yeah, let me see some other questions. Um, one second. Is it pause? Is it converting to Jack Mormon? Okay. What about a guy wants the certificate from the church? His ancestors converted to Christianity in order to prove he's Jewish. Good. Okay. Obviously not going to prove that, but yeah. Let me see other questions here. Yeah, any other issues? Again, I will make very clear, very, very clear. It has been cleared, has been made clear, already, right? And that is that if you're going to do it, you do it right. If you're not going to do it, don't bother. But if you want to fit in, you want to fit in the best place. Right? Again, it's not for everybody. Some people, want to be more modern. They want to dress differently. They have different, philosophical outlook. Okay, right? That's fine. I became religious through them, so I do have what to say about them. The good and the bad, most of the bad, but in general, if someone wants to go that route, that's their choice. But they're also a dying breed. I'll tell you, they're a dying breed. There are communities like that, but they're very hard for them to pass it down. They get a tremendous dropout rate. Someone told me, I'll just tell you, a rabbi that I first learned under a blessed memory just recently passed away, told me he was a spiritual advisor to a yeshiva, to a modern Orthodox yeshiva. And he told me it's a number of years ago. A number of years ago, I saw him at a bris, saw him at a circumcision, and he told me straight out. He said in a modern Orthodox yeshiva, he said a modern Orthodox family, let's say better. He said there's a 1 in 4. He told me the stat was many years ago, 1 in 4 stay religious. That means it's a 75% dropout rate. He said this like, having a normal conversation, yeah. Then he told me in his yeshiva, he gets, modern Orthodox kids from, in university or going to university, whatever it is. And he told me straight out, if they go to university and they're the gabbai, they're in charge of services in, wherever they go to college, wherever they go to university, at least we know they pray with 10 men. That's what he told me. Yeah. So you got a 25% dropout, 75% dropout rate, right? And you got these people who come in yeshiva to become stronger and all that. So he said if they go to university and they're part of the minyan, very good, at least we know they pray. So why are you there? Yeah. In other words, it's like it's like a person's drowning in the ocean. Say, God save me. What does he do? He sends an anvil, it clunks you on the head, you drown. It's a dying, and it's a dying thing over here. He told me with his own statistics. With his own statistics. Okay, he wants to make it better. He wants to help it. Very good. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for that. Okay. But the vast majority are dying out. You're only going to save individuals. But that's a huge thing. A huge thing. 75% dropout rate. That's huge. So they what about the ultra Orthodox community? Maybe it's 10%. Maybe. Maybe it's not 75%. We have our own issues. Okay. 75% dropout rate? That's bad. 3 out of 4 are leaving the fold. We're not talking about just staying modern. They leave the fold altogether. That's a disaster. Disaster. Now, someone says, I want to be part of that. Okay. They want to dress the part. They want to be, okay. I'm saying it's a dying thing. It's a dying breed. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, let me take a few more questions here. Jerusalem is accepting. Depends where. Right? Depends where. Yeah. Yeah, so, again, if you dress the part, or if you don't dress the part, but yeah, depends where. Depends where. I'm not gonna say across the board or everywhere they are. Some places are. Not gonna, I'm not gonna say not. But again, you want to be part of a place that's part of a community. Yeah, part of a community. It's not so easy to find a community here either. And the reason is because most synagogues don't have a rabbi. So like, all right, people go pray here, pray there, pray the other place. It's really the learning. They've been learning over the last 20 years. You know, you need someone to lead. You need, why do people learning? Why do we need someone to teach us? Whatever. We know how to learn this and that. So we don't need a rabbi. Okay. But I think it's really our starting to learn. You need a community. You need to feel like even if there are, 100 synagogues within a 5 block radius, you need a place where you feel like it's home. You can relate to the people there, someone to guide you, whatever. And a lot of places don't have that. A lot of places do not have that. They're learning now. They need that. They're for sure learning that, over the years. But there are plenty of people. Okay, I got plenty of family here. I pray here. I pray there. This, that. They have the rabbi for whatever. Okay, yeah. When someone comes from the States, everything's, or other places, everything's centered around the synagogue. That's where everything centers around. Here, okay, you pray here, you pray there, you pray other places. Other places, a lot of times people pray in 3 different places, depending where they are during the day. Okay. They have one place they might pray more than others. Okay. Very good. Yeah, there are some people there, this, that, but, is there a rabbi in the synagogue? Most places don't have one. They don't have one. Should. That's all another topic for discussion. Yeah, I'm not gonna hit it now. So I'm saying that Los Angeles more accepting. Should be. It's not a major it's not New York, it's not New York and New Jersey. Now even New York and New Jersey, depends where, can be more accepting. Can very much be more accepting. Yeah. But most places I would say no different than Israel. Black and white. You fit in that way, very good. You don't fit in that way. Yeah. It gets spit out again. There are more accepting places than others. Right? But LA is out of town. It's a major city, not saying not they're, second Jewish population, third biggest Jewish population, right? Outside New York, right? So, that's true, but again, it's more open. Yeah, why would it be more open? Again, it's not as black and white. There's a lot of different shades there. So that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. You got other places. You got Houston, you got Dallas, you got places in Florida, you got Atlanta, you got what do you call it? You have St. Louis. St. Louis is a smaller place, smaller Jewish community. Yeah, Chicago, and people want to live in Chicago. Is a strong Jewish community. They're also Denver. Denver's more open. Seattle, but Seattle's got its own issues, different things. Well, there are places again, that are, definitely user friendly, no question, no question. I'm saying, it's just very black and white, very very black and white. Yeah, there are some places not that are more accepting. Okay, but you know, in most places, you want to fit in, right? So if you want to fit in, you got to dress a certain way. You got to, have a certain mentality. There are people that okay, will live in a certain place, but they might not agree with everything going on there and different things, and they may move. They may move because okay, they want to be religious. They're not talking about not being religious. They, certain things they don't like, so they want to be around more like-minded people. So there are certain places what we call Haredi light, like they're religious, but somewhere they're not. I wouldn't modern Haredi. What does that mean? I don't know. Yeah, smartphones. Yeah, yeah, maybe they watch movies, other things. I wouldn't call them the same modern Orthodox, but they're somewhere in between. Okay, but they're not going to like living in a mainstream place. So there are places that are opening up that going to cater to more people like that. Okay, right? But again, it's fitting in is not an easy thing anywhere, right? But Israel specifically. Yeah, let me deal with a few more other things here. Or for the money, yeah. Good points. I think Christians can hold on to a certain position of power. Yeah, money talks in a lot of ways, but yeah, it's also true. Yeah, any other questions? Let me just see. Yeah, any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here this every Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern time, 9 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, feel free, shoot me an email, or you can find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, Ethics for Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wish you have a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the